Hello, I'm Will Matthysen. This is clock number 181, recently completed. I'll take you through some basic steps in setting it up, how to adjust it, and basic maintenance, oiling, taking it apart and putting it back together again. To set up the clock and make sure that it's level, I use a little laser light which has got a self-leveling laser beam which just sits on the table. Take that and position that up against one of the edges of the case, so we know that in this position the clock is standing vertically. Once you've got it determined that way, you can move it across 90 degrees and level it across that direction. You can see that it's picking up the edge of the case. We know that the clock is level. Make sure that the little link which connects the pendulum to the crutch of the mechanism is swinging free and not scraping against the pendulum. It's that little part over there. Make sure that there's a clearance. This has got a clearance of about 2 millimeters. To set the clock into beat, what we're going to do is move that lever either up or down in a position where the beat is even. You can hear it's a little bit deeper on that side, so I'll move it down. Fraction, let's try that. We've set the pendulum in beat, and what we're going to do now is look at the amplitude of the pendulum. The minimum amount of power needed to drive the escapement or amplitude of the pendulum is that. If I set this thing running at a minimum mark, it'll slowly build up as the power works its way through the wheel train. The little arbors or shafts must be able to move back and forth about plus or minus half a mil. So you basically go through and just check each one. You can see there's a bit of clearance there. And there's clearance there, and there's clearance there. So we know there's sufficient end shake. With those basic checks, you know that the wheels are not binding and causing excessive friction. Now what I'm going to do is take the pendulum off, basically push the pendulum back until the link falls off, lift that up and remove that, move the pendulum. Okay, the pendulum's off. Now just check the pendulum roll. I'll just stop the escapement. Make sure that it spins absolutely freely, because you want absolutely minimum amount of friction on that. You can see the ball races have been cleaned quite nicely, and that spins nice and freely. What we're going to do now is let down the power. Now this step is absolutely essential. Never ever take a clock movement apart without taking the power down, or the whole spring will explode and wreck the mechanism. So the way to do that is to take the winding key, insert that on the winding stem and go forward slightly clockwise. Put your finger on the click. That then releases the spring, and wind it back anti-clockwise until the clock spring has been wound fully onto that drum. Now there's a maintaining power detonate which has engaged the spring, and now the clock is basically running on the maintaining power. So what I'm going to do is release that a bit further and then move the maintaining power detonate and run that back, and that takes the power off the wheel train. Okay, we'll now take the movement apart. The first thing to do is to take the movement and lay it flat. These are little barrel hinges that are held in by 2 little screws which expand out and lock the hinge into the wood. Close the door and just push up gradually. Now to remove the hands, all you do is put your finger on the top of that little arbor and push while you lift up the hand, and that should slide out. You'll notice there's a little slot which has been machined. That picks up a cross pin and ensures that it locates the hand. You remove the tapered pin, you push one way. You've then got the hour hand, you just slide that up. Removing the dial. Just get a felt pad, push that in. Okay, we've taken the clock movement apart, and what we're going to do now is check all the gears and the pinions and clean them, and also the ball races. Okay, these gears are made from phenolic resin. You can't put these in a bath of cleaning solution as you can with brass. So what I do is I take a small piece of soft balsa wood and insert that into the side so the end grain works into the form of the teeth. And you can see by just simply rolling around, I've basically created the negative of the teeth. And what you do is you take that and you just move that and sweep it across the surface of the teeth. It's also very absorbent. So if there's any oil which has migrated onto the teeth, it'll clean that as well. And all you need to do is work your way around. If it does leave a bit of swarf, all you do is you take a soft brush and you clean them. And this is the maintaining power spring and engaging pin. To take the spring off the winding drum, get a flat screwdriver, insert that in that screw. We're going to clean the ball races. I've got kerosene, which is very good as a solvent, and then after that I'm going to use shellite, and that basically gets rid of any residue. These are hybrid ceramic and stainless steel ball races, and they're shielded. This is when they first come. What I'm going to do is remove just one of the shields. Removing one shield basically enables the kerosene to get more easily into the grease. What you're trying to do is remove the original grease that comes with the bearing. It creates a lot of drag, and we replace replace that with a very light watch oil, which has got much less drag and hence friction. To get rid of the kerosene, we'll place them in shallite and let them soak for a while. Make sure that they're well dried. The oil I'm going to use is a Mobius 9010, which is a very light synthetic watch oil. And all you need is a very, very light coating, and then just work that in. Okay, we've finished oiling the ball races. What we're going to do now is assemble the rest of the clock and oil various other components as we assemble the clock. I use a slightly heavier synthetic oil. This is a Hermele clock oil. There's a small little countersunk hole which is drilled in the side of the shaft, which is going to pick up the screw in the side of the drum. So what you've got to do is get that lined up. So I've got that small hole lined up. That goes on there.
Make sure that the spring is straight and not going off at an angle.
There's a pre-drilled hole on the side of the shaft, so you want to get that grub screw over that position of that hole. So what you're going to do is line that up. Position that. When assembling the ball races, it's important to put the ball races back so that the exposed part of the ball race fits into the blind hole like that, and as a result the shielded side is exposed to the outside and hence will prevent dust from getting into the ball race. Also, just make sure there's a bit of end shake. Putting the ball races back in, put them with the shielded side out. Put a small drop of clock oil on the pivot and just on the inside sleeve of the bearing. If you found that any of the pivots are either running too tight or too loose, the way to adjust the end shake of the pivot is by adjusting the little brass cups which support the ball races. To determine how far we're going to adjust the pivot hole, what we're going to do is take a simple caliper, measure that distance. Now this is telling me that's 105 millimeters. I want to basically adjust that by 0.5 millimeter. If you don't have a drill press, a very simple way to do it is to set up your clock plate as before Place blocks of wood right behind where you want to adjust the pivot. Take the brass and just tap that in. And then re-measure. If you've got a drill press, it's quite easy just to set it up. Line up the pivot that you want to push out. Adjust the quill until it just bottoms out. I want to move that 1/2 millimeter. I basically set this gauge at 1/2 millimeter. And what you do is you just push. If you want to decrease the end shake, then obviously you have to push the pivots in. I've made up a little pusher out of brass. You'll notice that I've also tapered the inside just on the lathe with a very shallow cone which matches the taper on the end of the brass component. What I'm going to do is just take a little bit of masking tape to prevent it from marking that. I'll place that on top, insert that in the chuck again. Line up the work and just push that as far as it needs to go. It's a good idea to start from the low end of the wheel train, so we start from the spring side and we work our way up. Just a quick check to check the end shake. Just make sure that the underside of the pinion doesn't scrape against the side of the clock plate. Now it's easiest if you get the hour hand to line up with the 12 and place the minute hand on top, and then when they're both in the 12 position you know that the hands are perfectly synchronized. Okay, to remove the beat adjustment pin, all you've got to do, it's a friction fit, so you just twist and pull and it comes out of a little brass block. You push that in the back and push that out, and you can see that's how it goes together. Make sure that the pendulum bob can slide freely up and down. There's a little pin. I've drilled a number of holes so that you can reposition that. In this case it's in the middle hole. This is the back of the pendulum, that's the front, so we've got to position it like that. Push that over there, roll that across and push that pin until it's halfway in, so it's exactly centered. Should be a little mark on the side, which is the midpoint, so you can take that up to there. I've put the pendulum back in place. We now need to wind up the clock. Winding. Okay, set the pendulum going. The last thing we need to do is oil the pellets. So you're oiling the pellet where it intersects the teeth of the wheel. Just a tiny amount of oil, you don't want to have a lot, otherwise it'll run all over. Move it across to the other side and do a tiny amount on there, and that will then equally distribute the oil around the wheel. So all we need to do now is that little pin, just work that in a bit. There we go, and we're ready to go. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope this has been of some use to you, and if you've got any more questions or issues you want me to explain, please either refer to my website or contact me directly and I'll help you out. Thank you.